After the crushing defeat at the Battle of Ankara in 1402, the mighty Ottoman Empire stood fractured and bleeding. Sultan Bayezid I had been captured by Timur, and with his downfall, the realm crumbled into chaos. His sons began a brutal power struggle that plunged the empire into a period of instability known as the Ottoman Interregnum. For over a decade, the once mighty Ottomans teetered on the edge of ruin. Amid this chaos, a young prince named Mehmed emerged, not with brute strength alone, but with sharp intellect, political cunning, and relentless patience. From his base in Amasya, Mehmed began the delicate work of rebuilding what had been torn apart. While his brothers turned to force and bloodshed, he turned to diplomacy and calculated moves. Mehmed I's rise was not swift, but it was steady. He slowly gathered allies, building trust with provincial governors, religious leaders, and scholars who longed for peace. His vision was not just to claim a throne, but to restore an empire that had lost its soul. His first major step came when he defeated his brother Isa. It wasn't just a military victory, it was a psychological one. It proved that Mehmed was not a passive claimant, but a capable leader. He secured his base, expanded influence, and kept his rivals off balance. Unlike his more impulsive brothers, Mehmed understood the power of public perception. He knew that to truly rule, he needed the loyalty of the people. He maintained communication with the ulama, the Islamic scholars, whose support was essential to win the hearts of the common folk. Then came the most decisive moment in 1413. The Battle of Chamorlu. Here, Mehmed faced his strongest rival, his brother Musa, in a fight that would determine the empire's fate. Mehmed's forces were better organized, his alliances stronger, and his leadership more trusted. Musa was defeated, and Mehmed claimed the title of Sultan. With that, the Interregnum came to an end, but the real work had only begun. The empire Mehmed inherited was a shadow of its former self. Its treasury was drained, its borders vulnerable, and its people exhausted from years of war. Mehmed knew he had to rebuild not just territory but hope, trust, and stability. One of his first priorities was restoring central authority. The civil war had allowed powerful local leaders to act independently. Mehmed began appointing loyal governors and re-established the court bureaucracy that had once held the empire together. He avoided unnecessary purges, choosing reconciliation over revenge. Those who had once opposed him but were willing to serve the state were forgiven and restored to power. This earned him both loyalty and respect. Religion played a key role in his strategy. He began a campaign to rebuild mosques, madrasas, and religious endowments destroyed during the conflicts. These structures symbolized peace, stability, and divine order, exactly what the people needed to see. He empowered the Sufi orders who held influence in rural areas. These spiritual leaders acted as bridges between the people and the state, spreading messages of unity and hope in troubled times. At the same time, Mehmed reformed the military. He revitalized the Timur system, which rewarded loyal soldiers with land grants in return for service. This not only strengthened the army but ensured the loyalty of landholders whose wealth now depended on a strong, stable empire. His approach to foreign policy was cautious and deliberate. Rather than chase glory on the battlefield, he focused on avoiding further conflict. He re-established diplomatic ties with the Byzantines and renewed peace treaties with Venice and Balkan states. This bought him time to focus inward. But not all threats were foreign. Internally, one of his most dangerous challenges came from Sheikh Bedreddin, a former judge turned populist revolutionary. Bedreddin attracted followers with promises of social justice and religious equality. Ideas that threatened the fragile balance Mehmed was trying to restore. Mehmed moved swiftly and decisively. He defeated Bedreddin's rebellion and had him tried and executed. Yet even here, Mehmed balanced strength with restraint. He used the occasion to reinforce the rule of law without plunging the empire back into fear and oppression. Throughout his reign, Mehmed maintained a deep sense of purpose. He believed he had been chosen not just to rule, but to heal. He saw himself as a servant of the divine, responsible for protecting his people and guiding the empire back to greatness. He promoted learning and culture, patronizing scholars, poets, and historians. Though his reign was not marked by great conquest or monumental architecture, it was a time of quiet revival, a reawakening of Ottoman identity. His administrative decisions were guided by balance. He neither ruled with an iron fist nor allowed lawlessness to return. He relied on the counsel of wise men, respected religious guidance, and never lost sight of the people's suffering. By the time he died in 1421, Mehmed I had laid the groundwork for a unified, functioning empire. He passed the throne to his son, Murad II, along with a renewed sense of direction and a stable foundation. Mehmed's greatest achievement was not defeating his brothers, it was rebuilding the very idea of empire. He restored faith in leadership, re-established the rule of law, and reminded the world that the Ottomans were far from finished. His story is not one of flashy conquest or loud triumphs. It is a story of quiet resilience, steady wisdom, and a commitment to something greater than personal glory. And in many ways that made Mehmed I the most important Ottoman of his time. When Mehmed I took full control of the Ottoman throne in 1413, it wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a revival of an empire on the verge of collapse. His leadership in the years that followed would leave a lasting impact on the foundations of the Ottoman state. Mehmed's reign, though relatively short, was a time of healing, quiet strength, and nation-building. One of his earliest priorities was restoring the confidence of the people. Years of war and division had left communities traumatized. Villages had been razed, food supplies had dwindled, and everyday life had become a struggle. Mehmed's approach was to restore normalcy, one province at a time. He didn't use fear to control his subjects. He used fairness. In cities like Edirne and Bursa, Mehmed ordered the rebuilding of public infrastructure. Roads were repaired. Markets reopened. Mosques were refurbished. Public fountains flowed again. People slowly returned to a routine that had been shattered during the Interregnum. The people began to see their sultan not as a distant ruler, but as someone actively involved in their welfare. In administrative matters, Mehmed showed great wisdom. He brought back experienced viziers and judges who had been sidelined during the Civil War. These individuals helped re-establish the rule of law and streamline governance. Courts reopened and justice was once again administered in towns that had known only chaos. To avoid the emergence of future rivals, Mehmed was careful not to alienate the various factions within the empire. He appointed governors from different regions and ethnic backgrounds. This inclusive approach prevented rebellion and promoted a sense of shared destiny among diverse peoples. Mehmed was also deeply committed to religious harmony. The Ottoman Empire was home to Muslims, Christians, Jews, and other religious groups. He understood that unity could only be achieved through tolerance. Churches and synagogues were not just protected, they were allowed to operate freely. Religious leaders of all communities were treated with respect and often consulted on matters affecting their people. One of Mehmed's most enduring contributions was his emphasis on education and knowledge. He restored madrasas and brought scholars to court. Islamic law, science, history, and literature began to flourish again. This intellectual revival became the foundation of what would later be known as the Ottoman Renaissance under his descendants. Culturally, Mehmed's reign saw the return of poetry, music, and public storytelling. These may seem like minor details, but they were signs of life returning to a wounded society. Artists were encouraged to compose works that celebrated unity, divine justice, and the history of the Ottoman family. Militarily, Mehmed knew that the empire needed to be strong, not for conquest, but for defense and deterrence. He restructured the army, ensuring it remained loyal to the central authority. He maintained a balance between the janissaries, the provincial cavalry, and the auxiliary units to avoid any single military group gaining too much power. He also worked to secure borders that had become porous during the Civil War. Instead of launching costly campaigns, he preferred negotiating treaties, strengthening forts, and using marriage alliances to build peace. This cautious foreign policy stabilized the empire and allowed it to recover its strength without further bloodshed. Yet Mehmed was not weak. When threats emerged, he responded decisively. Revolts were crushed, bandits eliminated, and treacherous officials removed without hesitation. But his punishments were measured, never excessive. His goal was always stability, not vengeance. One of the most telling aspects of Mehmed's reign was how he dealt with religious radicals. After the rebellion led by Sheikh Bedreddin was suppressed, Mehmed used the opportunity to emphasize the importance of spiritual discipline and lawful conduct. He promoted mainstream Sufi orders who preached unity and peace. Mehmed also understood the importance of symbolism. He participated in Friday prayers, led religious festivals, and visited holy shrines. These public acts reassured the people that their ruler was devout and connected to their spiritual values. In a time when people were emotionally and spiritually drained, such gestures had deep meaning. In his personal life, Mehmed was known for his simplicity. Unlike future sultans who lived in lavish palaces, Mehmed kept a modest court. He preferred long conversations with scholars over banquets and was often seen walking among his people without a heavy guard. He maintained strong ties with religious leaders and scholars, including prominent muftis, who helped draft legal codes that would influence Ottoman governance for decades. His reign was not just political. It was spiritual and moral in tone. When Mehmed fell ill in 1421, the empire was far stronger than when he had taken it. The economy had stabilized, the army was loyal, the people were largely united, and the institutions of government had been restored. Before his death, he ensured a smooth transition by naming his son Murad as heir, avoiding another interregnum. Murad II would later go on to become one of the Ottomans' most successful rulers, but he did so on the solid foundation laid by Mehmed I, the quiet architect of imperial revival. Today, Mehmed I is often overshadowed by flashier sultans like Mehmed the Conqueror or Suleiman the Magnificent. But without his calming hand and wise leadership, there may never have been an Ottoman golden age. His true legacy lies not in conquests or palaces, but in peace, reform, and the slow resurrection of a wounded state. He gave the Ottoman Empire a second chance, and history has not forgotten.